And a quick introduction. My name is Maya. I work as a Foresights consultant, but I'm now doing a lot more work in the intersections of climate change and Foresights innovation. And I'm a buddy at TMI. I'm volunteering at this event, and it's an absolute honor and privilege to be moderating this panel with these two superstars who I've had the privilege of knowing over the last week. I'll tell you why they're superstars in a short bit. Just some house rules, like you can see the Mentimeter QR code. Please scan that and post your questions as we go along. This is a 45-minute panel, 40 minutes now. We're down to 40 minutes, so we will keep the question and answers towards the end. That's it. So really excited to kick off today's session. It's one of the really fun talks that I had last week with you guys on our briefing call. And Rémi has kind of hammered us with a lot of interesting technicalities around the regulations, for those of you who were here for the previous session. And for me, it was really, really eye-opening and interesting to hear about them. And I know that awareness levels can be quite different. So I just want to check, if before we enter a world of more jargons, how many of you know what some familiar faces been here the whole day, so I'm guessing you know by now. But do you know about the regulations, the regulations that we're going to talk about? So we're all starting off at the right spot. So I'm going to kind of give you a very brief introduction of what these two do, and then you guys can introduce yourselves. Rémi, as you all know, is an expert on zero waste, and he's a consultant, but he also is, I don't know if you introduce yourself as this, do you call yourself a dumpster diver? But I also think he's an absolute superstar. He's like a trash king, because it's so much wealth in that space, and it just takes so much of a mindset change to understand how powerful that resource can be, because it's already consumed. It's post-use right now. What can you make out of it? So I think that's just hugely commendable. And Andrew here is the e-waste king, who does the version of that with e-waste. So we're going to get more into the kind of specific practicalities of implementing these regulations with them. So it was really useful to have your overview of the regulations earlier. Now I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourself. Rémi, I noticed you've been back to back to back to back, so no, we're going to give him a break. And Andrew, give him a break for 5 minutes. He's been doing an expert talk, before that a workshop. And let's have Andrew introduce himself.
All right, hello everyone. Okay, so my name is Andrew. I'm from KGS. We are a licensed e-waste recycling company in Singapore. Not only we do recycle, we also support the PRS operator, which is part of the EPR program we're going to talk about today, in terms of recycling for them. Anything else you want to know?
Okay, so I guess most of you were here before, so but I'll just reiterate. So my name is Rémi. I'm the founder of Zero Waste City. Zero Waste City is a pure consulting advisory consulting firm in Singapore, and we typically work with the waste generators, shopping mall, hotels, and also industrial sector, to help them to analyze the waste and look for opportunities to reduce waste, improve recycling, and eventually achieve zero waste goals. So typically my job is to tell management what type of trash it generates, how much, and then connect them with companies like KGS to say, okay, if you work with them, you might get all your e-waste recycled properly. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm going to just get you to get a little further into that introduction. Could you talk to us and tell us about your journey of getting into recycling? I know you were in paper earlier, and now you're in e-waste. So now, just to give us some context, what have you seen actually evolve in the space of recycling in the time that you've been there, Andrew?
So I've been in the waste management and recycling sector for almost 10 years now. Previously was in waste paper recycling. I mean, we all see digitalization and the usage of paper is coming down. Printing companies are not here anymore. And kind of pivoted. So I joined another company, KGS, with the co-founders. So now more focused on electronic waste. The interesting thing about electronic waste versus traditional recyclables like carton box paper, plastics, is non-homogeneous. Makes it much harder to recycle. But if you break it down, it can then be homogeneous. So that's the kind of our service and value add to it. If not, it will be much harder to recycle in its current form, per se. Yeah.
And Rémi, how long have you been, consulting and you founded Zero Waste? So what has your experience of, the reception been to this idea of waste management and sorting out, like since the time you started to like what it is today?
Okay. So I've been a consultant for now over 10 years. My first consulting was actually in energy efficiency. So I was doing it in Australia, and then I moved to Singapore, where I switched from energy efficiency to resource use efficiency. And there was virtually no reason for me to do that. I mean, I didn't know anyone. I've never done waste audit before. What happened is that I got to realize that the potential value add on a sustainability perspective was potentially much greater when looking at waste and looking at energy. What I like to say is that when you save 1 kilowatt hour of energy at the point of use, like here, you are saving 5 kilowatt hour of energy upstream because you have the transformation losses, the transmission losses, and so on. But when you're looking at waste, physical resources, there's actually a gigantic amount of embedded energy and embedded resources in it. When you save 1 kilogram of resources at the point of use by reducing it, you are actually saving up to 70 kilograms of resources upstream. So the multiplicator effect on a bigger scale is much greater on the waste side. And that's the reason why I thought, okay, that makes so much sense. So let's go into waste rather than energy. It's a very different board game. When you look at energy, you are looking at technology, and you are looking at users, operators. When you're looking at waste, you're looking at so many more stakeholders, and you're also more talking about the behavior of people rather than the technology. And that is really painful, because it's much easier to say to someone, okay, we're going to replace this technology with this thing, it will do the same job as before, but more efficiently. That's easy, that's very easy to do. But then tell to someone, okay, now I would like you to stop doing like this, but try to do it like this instead. It will sure take you a bit more manpower to do this, but at least you will save so much more resources. That's much harder to do. So I was not actually expecting it. That's my mistake. And I ended up just continuing doing it for the last 6 years. Yeah.
I'd really love to get into that idea of behavior change as one of the barriers a little later into our discussion. While we're on this topic, I want to understand what is the current, now that we are having some top-down regulations, although it's fairly recent relatively to how long this has been a problem. The regulations are, what did you say, 2019 was the first act, and then 2023?
2019 was the act, the enforcement of the EPR was 2021.
2021. Yeah, so since the enforcement of the act, how do you think the awareness has gone up? Like, do you think the awareness has gone up among certain players, like companies or individuals? Like, where do you see the awareness growing, and what is the impact of it?
I guess maybe just pose a question to the ground. Where to dispose your e-waste? Do you know? Show of hands. Difficult? Anybody seen the white bins around, fair price? Yeah, the Alba. I don't like to use the, but yeah, the bins. Sorry, the PRS bins, the Alba bins. Yeah, correct. So that's one. But it is one of the many methods you could recycle. Maybe I just try to introduce the EPR a little bit more. In 2021, EPR was introduced. Not only Alba bins all around, Fair Price, Harvey Norman, major retailers. You also get one-for-one take-back service. As you buy a new fridge, they take back your old fridge. Same for washing machine, things like that, right? So as KGS, we are also supporting Alba because in the regulation, there's the differentiation of regulated and non-regulated e-waste. Anybody know what's what? Yeah, so that's the point, right? So we propose and have our bins out there to help with the non-regulated e-waste, but also to allow public to throw any e-waste to any bin. But back end, we are working with Alba to divert regulated ones to them so that it is captured on a national level. So that's one of the things we are doing. So awareness-wise, yeah, I would think it's like a 0 to 1 from nowhere to dispose, and now it's at least somewhere. But we feel there are much more that can be done. May I introduce my
No, wait.
yeah,
I have some more questions on the awareness. I want to go to -1 awareness, which is like, why is you are drowning in your e-waste, so you don't realize, like layperson like me, who probably, I work in this space, so I'm a little more knowledgeable before you guys are making judgments about me. But I have come across many people who don't understand or realize why you should perhaps recycle your batteries, like basic stuff. And you know, has that awareness of why is it important to recycle e-waste, has that improved since the regulation has come in or through other sources? Because it all starts, that behavior you were talking about, the human behavior, it all starts with awareness and understanding and appreciation of why, right? And then you can get people to come and put their stuff in. So that's where I'm coming from. So just tracking back to what has the impact of the regulation been on the overall understanding of the people of Singapore, be it residential, citizens, individual users, or corporates, like in the importance of e-waste recycling?
First. Okay, so I cannot really tell much about consumer understanding and consumer awareness. The one thing I can definitely more say on the business side is that there have been a shift over the last few years in terms of how much care companies put into waste management, not just e-waste, but waste management in general. And that comes from at least three factors, I would say. Number one, there have been a push from Western-based multinational companies to ask the Singapore-based entities to adopt the same level of practices as they are doing in Europe or US. That's been one reason for change. The second came from, it's a very weird one. I never really fully grasped it, understood it, but it seemed that companies seem to be like, okay, now we are pretty good at electricity, we're pretty good at water, so now let's look at the last utility we don't want to look at, which is waste. Right. Somehow there seems to have been a change like this, that people feel like, okay, now I'm good with the rest, I can look at waste. Mm-hmm. And the last one, which is coming up right now actually, is the fact that now listed companies have an obligation for carbon emission reporting. And in this carbon emission reporting, there is something called scope number 3. And scope number 3 have one component related to waste management. And because of that, more big companies based in Singapore are now asking at least to monitor the waste properly, just to allow them to do like proper reporting on carbon emissions.
Thanks for that. So it's just not just one regulation coming from the government, it's a multiple kind of forces that are, yeah. Andrew, anything from your end, like in terms of, have manufacturers started doing things differently because now they have the responsibility of taking back?
Yes. So one thing nice about Singapore's regulation is once they determine something's recyclable, they will ban it at their incineration plants. So if a full load of e-waste is not allowed, a full load of paper is not allowed into incineration. So that's good in a sense. There's nowhere else to go but to recycle, right? But there will be leakage everywhere, right? Once electronic inside a full bin of rubbish, nobody really can see, right? That's one. The other would be, yes, retailers are taking back an obligation, but to fulfill the obligation, they probably say they offer the option. I don't know, at a paid fee or whatnot. So it could be packaged in, so it might seem a little bit more expensive to buy electronics nowadays. Part of the downside, but it should increase the recycling channels. Yeah. And that's what the whole EPR is for, to hope to recycle what is traditionally not that desirable in terms of recycling. Yeah, especially the large household items. Yeah.
On to the thing that you wanted to talk about earlier. One of the, again, you touched upon this several times today, Rémi, and one of the things that is really difficult, especially for e-waste, for smaller goods, it's probably okay to bring it to your cold storage or fair price and put it in a thing, but in larger goods and things like that, it's various categories of e-waste, and it's quite inconvenient. So can you talk about how you think about convenience versus inconvenience and put that into your service?
So, as explained earlier, the size, you should put it in the e-waste bin, right? But we did a survey. We found out that most feel that the e-waste bin are not as convenient to where they are staying or where they are working. And also, half the time, electronic waste has data-bearing devices, your personal information, your photograph, things like that. And they are unsure of dumpster diver like that will pick it up from the bin. So yeah, so we come up with a program. We call it the Take Back program. My colleague is at the back, which if you have e-waste at home, you could reach out to her to have that bag. You get the bag and then fill up. We have a back-end system. We work with Pick Locker, the yellow lockers you see all around public housing flats nowadays. That is originally used for like your e-commerce delivery, but we use it the opposite way for you to deposit in and then route back to for collection. So in that sense, it is locked or parts of the journey, and dumpster diver can't interfere, right? Yeah, so if you like, try it out and give us feedback on user interface, and we'll hope to improve on that. Yeah, so that's in convenience and security, right? So for large household, yeah, now that I think Alba has stepped up a bit, they offer doorstep collection. You should cook for them for that. But for those who are living in public housing, HDBs, your town council could also offer your bulky disposal. So there are many channels and avenues to dispose them properly. Yeah.
And this is interesting because it does generate a lot of local jobs, and it or does it? The question is, does when we talk about reducing consumption or reducing waste, or 3 Rs that the government loves to campaign about, is that something that's also in some ways benefiting the local economy in any way in terms of refurbishing the e-waste? And I don't think it's anyone can. It requires some technical expertise, right, to pull apart electrical devices and identify, like to your point about the heterogeneous and homogeneous materials in it. Yeah.
So part of our services in KGS is one of the processes. First, when the items like a laptop comes into our facility, it's categorized to like different gradings, if it's reusable or not. So if it is, we'll try to repair and refurbish them for second-hand market, and we also work with some charity organization to donate to low-income families. So that's to the digital gap issue, right? If it's not, then for recycling, we'll dismantle them and break it down to printed circuit boards, the plastics, and things like that, and hand off to the next plastic recycler, aluminum recycler, to sort out the recycling. So in that sense, yes, it is labor intensive and kind of create an opportunity for jobs if people don't mind. So that begs to the question of if the population here in Singapore it's up for that kind of jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, we need someone like Rémi to make it really sexy for us. So how would you make it kind of? How have you found this as a sell?
Yeah, I've been asked this question once, and I'm definitely not a marketer, so I cannot really help on this one. I just wanted to add one more point in relation to recycling creating jobs. There was a very interesting study done in the US where they tried to analyze different types of waste streams and see what was the social economical impact of the recycling industry. And what they were finding out was that for every 10,000 tons per year of recycling of plastic, for instance, you were creating 20 jobs and over $1 million worth of additional incomes. And the more you go towards the reuse industry, and the more job you create and the more value you create. That's the reason why e-waste is actually considered by a lot of people as like one of the best value type of waste streams, because the intrinsic value of reuse mostly. Yeah. As for the question of getting more people to work in the waste management sector, there are at least 2 things that happen in Singapore in relation, you probably will share more on this one, but on the low value type of waste streams, not e-waste, but like the dirtier one, like paper, plastic, and so on. What I've heard a lot were that number one, you had a gigantic cultural challenge because people don't want to be seen as working for the waste industry. And that culturally speaking, that's something that is really tough to fight. You need to have some leaders willing to step up and show that, no, it's okay. That's one part. You have another part, which is wages related to the waste sector. Now, the Singapore government do set a minimum as to the wage, which is actually not too bad, but still. The question is, and also then you have another challenge, which is actually a bit more real, which is working conditions of working with waste. Even if the salary is not too bad, then you have to face the cultural challenge, and then you have to face the fact that it's a tough job to do.
It is a health hazard, isn't it?
Yes. Typically, one person was telling me that getting drivers to drive garbage trucks is a challenge. Because it's, okay, first of all, it's not a very nice job. You have to step up, in and out of your cabin all the time whenever you do a stop to bring the trash in. So it's not very comfortable. Then you get to the incineration plant. There's still a risk that you may feel unwell and suddenly fall into the pit and you're in the wrong place. So some people actually not particularly happy about this type of job and don't want to stay there for a long time. So there's a real challenge in terms of truck driver, for instance, for that.
Well, I hope this is a place where AI can save the day, since AI is...
I don't
Anyway,
think so.
that was just a joke. Jokes aside, I just want to understand what are the other kind of practical things that, let's start with the good stuff, the positive stuff. What has worked in the adoption of the regulations it could be with individuals or for, what has made it possible to happen? A plus side?
I guess one main plus side is it's more visible now. From before 2021, there was literally no good avenue, no dedicated e-waste. Okay, there's a voluntary one, but yeah, it's on a voluntary basis. But other than that, you can't really find this kind of abundance of e-waste bins around, different networks of channel you can recycle your stuff. And I think government is really pushing, trying to bring up the recycling rate and asking even the industries, what can we do? Maybe even get in the informal sector who has better reach to their households to consolidate and bring the volumes in. Yeah, so it feels really like a 0 to 1. It is the first time we are doing EPR in Singapore, so not too bad per se, but still way to go. I don't think this is there's a silver bullet or it's a I'm done kind of day that we will see. It will always be a continuous improving, trying to increase recycling rate. Maybe once e-waste is done, next is bottles, next is paper, next is some packaging. I think it's always a job to be done. And it's kind of, if we don't adopt now, then when, and once we see the disastrous outcome of things, it might really be too late.
Rémi was sharing some stats on actually the government's working against a deadline, right? In terms of how much more can how much longer can our incinerators take waste? Could you repeat that set of stats? Because I found it really interesting that it's almost like forcing someone to work against a deadline. And with the regulations coming, because in your earlier talk, you were talking about how the regulations are here. Yes, they're slightly late, but at least they're here now. But that's also because we're short on time.
Yes.
Could you repeat some of those?
Sure. Okay, so a few things I didn't mention were that you have the government issuing guidelines and commitments for the country as a whole to achieve better waste management practices. So I was mentioning that for 2030, the government has a commitment to achieve 70% recycling rate overall in Singapore, with specific waste streams have been targeted and prioritized in this development. And one of those targets was to have an EPR scheme on packaging implemented by 2025. Yes, so that's the thing you were referring to.
I was also referring to the amount of time we have left till
yes.
the islands get,
Yes,
we can't use
filled.
them, yes, till they get filled.
So I was mentioning that, one of the things that stresses out a lot of government right now is the fact that anything which is being burnt, anything which is not incinerated and not recycled, will eventually be turned into ashes and then sent to Cesaro landfill, which is an offshore island used as a deposit place for ashes. And you can just look at it from the satellite images. When you look at the satellite images. We can do it from I use it Google Earth. You can look at the history of satellite images in Singapore, and you can see the area of the Semakau which is being filled up. And you can see that, yes, very clearly by 2035, the whole island will be effectively full. And right now, there's no plan B to deal with these ashes once the island is full. We don't know what Singapore can do or can send the ashes to deal with it. And therefore, every way possible to minimize ashes from being generated is something that they are definitely working towards. Yes. Now, the challenge becomes how strong can they go into enforcing the policy. So we have now 3 years of experience in the operation of the EPR scheme. And it's great. I mean, there's now, as Andrew mentioned, we have now many locations where you can bring your e-waste. But I was actually looking at all the declaration from the ministry about how much e-waste has been collected under the scheme, and I'm really not impressed. I mean, I'm saying that when I'm looking at the trend of how much e-waste has been collected, for the last 3 years, nothing have actually really changed, it seems. The amount of e-waste collected per year, apparently is 3 times better than it was before the EPR, but over the last 3 years, it has been very steady. No huge improvement. Right. So I'm hopeful that the free doorstep collection from ALBA will help, because I think there's definitely room for improvement in the collection of e-waste.
Yeah, because we are working backwards from 2030.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, listening to both of you speak, to me it sounds like this is great. This is a great start. We have the regulation. We've had 3 years of practicing and enforcing it. We've gotten people to some extent to change behavior. What are the gaping holes in the regulation, and what do we know from EPR schemes in the rest of the world that we know kind of our learnings that we should perhaps be aware of or keep an eye out for in Singapore?
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so EPR schemes is not a new thing. There have been EPR schemes for the last 30 or 40 years. The oldest one being in Europe, then you have US, and you also have some in Asia, Taiwan, Korea, Japan. Singapore is just following that trend of EPR schemes being implemented. And you have very successful EPR schemes, and you have also a lot of not so successful EPR schemes. Now, just remember, the EPR schemes, the basic idea is that you are extending the responsibility of the producer to handling or contributing to the handling of the waste generated from the goods they bring to the market. In most of the time, what it means is you ask the producer to pay a fee for every ton of e-waste or every ton of packaging you bring onto the market. And the question is, how is this fee calculated to somehow create a trend toward improving the packaging? There's one example. Most of schemes are simple. How many tons of packaging do you bring to the market? This is a fee for each type of material, $100, $200 per ton, and this is how you pay it. And the money then is used to pay for the waste collection. That's the basic way. You can also design a scheme so it's more sophisticated. So it creates some sort of incentive naturally for the producer to minimize packaging. And there was this scheme, EPR scheme in the UK, where they created something called the packaging credit note. The basic idea is, let's say I'm a producer and I supply, let's say, 1,000 tons of plastic packaging onto the market. I need to compensate these 1,000 tons with 1,000 packaging credit note. This packaging credit note is produced by the recycler. So the recycler, for every ton of plastic or every ton of paper they recycle, they create 1 credit note. And the idea is that the producer will pay the recycler. So you are basically creating a virtual private sector where the producer is paying for the recycling.
And is the recycler kind of monitored by the regulatory authorities, or are they just private players?
So the regulatory body need to supervise the creation of the certificates and the surrender of the certificates, but the pricing can be private. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I mean, that was the idea. What happened in practice is that the scheme had gigantic flaws in it. what happened is that if I am a recycler and I receive, let's say, 1 ton of plastic waste, and at the end I actually recycle, let's say, 70% of it, because the rest is contamination, I only create 0.7 packaging credits, not. But if I am an exporter of plastic waste and I send it to Malaysia, I get 100% of the tons of plastic waste. So it became an unfair advantage, an unfair situation where the exporter could export plastic waste anywhere around the world with no accountability for what will happen after and still get the full money. So that virtually actually killed the recycling industry, because now the recyclers were competing with an exporter that will just get paid to send trash overseas without even having to care whether it will be recycled or not. That was, and this type of thing is not just UK. There's different versions like this also in Europe and so on. And this is actually how it happened that so many tons of plastic waste went to Southeast Asia, because they were getting paid to send trash all the way to Southeast Asia. It was cheaper to ask someone to dump the waste in the countryside in Malaysia.
With or without recycling plants, they were just being sent
That's
there.
Right. So this type of EPR scheme, you have to be extremely careful on how it's designed, so it does not create this type of situation. Yeah.
But is that applicable to Singapore, because we are an island, and are we responsible? Like, it's interesting to try and figure out who is the producers are not necessarily in Singapore. So I'm just curious about the ecosystem and the infrastructure of making the producer responsible for the post-use.
Well, it is very much relevant for Singapore too. Even if the manufacturer or the brand owner is based overseas, there's still someone in Singapore responsible to bring it. So those middlemen, effectively, will be the one to take the responsibility for it. As for the recycling industry in Singapore is very small. Most of post-consumer waste will get sent overseas for recycling. And therefore, it becomes even more relevant in this case to ensure that the future EPR scheme of Singapore will take into account where does the waste actually end up to. Because you don't want to subsidize the export of plastic waste just to end up in a landfill or end up in the natural environment instead of a recycler.
Okay, so we've got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to hit the questions that you have posted on Mentimeter. I'm going to just address this to you, Andrew. How is right to repair being implemented in Singapore? Is that something that you can speak to?
Yeah, it's not. It's something that we want to do because it's the right thing to do, and it's also more economical to do it. So something, if it's repairable, I salvage more value out of it. Okay, so put it this way, a 2-year-old phone or laptop versus a 10-year-old. Dismantle both, you probably get the same amount of gold, silver, plastic, metal. But if you repair, then you see the difference in value. So kind of the market forces is kind of forcing the right to repair movement already. Yeah, it's just that sometimes things are not as easily repairable because they are soldered together instead of bolted together. It's just upstream. We have to design for recycling, design for repair, design for dismantle. Yeah.
And Rémi, there are some questions for you. Some unanswered questions from the last session, so I'll hit that first. Intro from Rémi gives me the opportunity to ask my question from the last session that was not answered. What are the trade-offs between energy management and waste management? Because you started off with that as your big opportunity.
What is the trade-off between?
Energy management and waste management. You did mention that waste management is harder because you had to deal with behavior. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, because sustainability is about the trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to recycle some waste, you need the energy to do that.
Yes.
Right? So that's sometimes you proposed a different rationale where you said there's a lot of energy also embarked.
Mm-hmm.
In the waste, right?
Yes.
But sometimes, I mean, when you talk about food waste in particular,
Mm-hmm.
people want to do a lot about that, but it's very energy intensive to actually recycle food waste, right?
Yes.
If you want to recycle food waste or avoid leakage in the supply chain, or it costs a lot of energy.
Mm.
So, and not only for food, I mean, you want to dismantle a car, to recycle the car, it's going to cost a lot of energy to do so.
Yes. Okay, yes, fair enough. Okay, let's Okay, if I have let's say 1 ton of aluminium that I extract for virgin resources from the ore, or 1 ton of aluminium that I get from cans, post-consumer cans, the recycling process will cost me, I think it's like 10 times or 100 times, I forgot now, 10 times less energy to recycle aluminium than having to do it from scratch. When you look at plastic, it's not as obvious. The actual gain of energy efficiency is not as good in recycling, but still, carbon emission-wise and energy-wise, it will still be better to recycle plastic than to manufacture from scratch. When you look at waste, when you look at food waste, you will when you look at food waste, it will consume more energy to recycle food waste than having it to do it from scratch. But the main reason is actually not because it's less energy intensive. It's because when you make food in the first place, you actually have a gigantic amount of energy used in the making of food, but that is called the sun, and it's free. So actually there's a lot of energy input in making food, but when you want to artificially recycle food waste using machinery and so on, then you indeed consume more energy. So if you look at the total energy input, it's still better to recycle, yes. But if you look at the artificial energy we use, then yes, there's actually a trade-off here. But in the case of food waste recycling, you actually get other benefits, which are typically land usage, water usage, biodiversity, and so on, that you can benefit from recycling food waste over farming more lands. Yeah.
And I just have a following question from there. Is the fact that then contributes as raw material or resource into a different industry, is that calculated into the efficiency process of, like bits of the electronic bits that just get into a different sort of a cycle again, right? Like, is there a way of calculating the value that brings into a different product, like in this whole energy cycle, like in the whole LCA process? Is there a way to kind of continuously like create that circular chain of value from the recycled goods to like where it goes, say food, for instance, if it just goes through a food waste thing and becomes biofuel, do we have a means of calculating that?
Okay, the answer is yes.
That adds into the next life?
Okay, we have means to calculate it. I know some people have done it. I've not done it myself. I know some people have done it. And I do know there was one company, I forgot the name, they are a large, is it HP? I'm not sure anymore. There was like a big electronic manufacturer who actually had implemented a very significant program of recovery of their old product for reuse into the new machines. And they were able to quantify, both economically and environmentally speaking, what was the benefit of doing such a program. And the results seem to be absolutely very explicit in the fact that, yes, it was worth it, both economically and environmentally speaking, to reuse and salvage resources, even parts, into new goods.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, just another question, and I think I'm going to pose it for both of you, although the person who's put this in has specifically asked this for Rémi, but I want to ask Andrew as well. When something has gone really well, do you have a case study of a client of yours or corporate partnership where it just goes really seamlessly and smoothly to the T, like your ideal dream project? What are the components that need to go in to make it so?
Okay, so probably share a program that we did before 2021. So I think it was 2019 or 2020. There was this saga about electric scooters in Singapore. There was a restriction on the use, illegal modification. There was a big issue about that. So government gave some incentives for those unregistered ones to be disposed, but that didn't went well. So we partner up with NEA, LTA to do an island-wide recycling program. So we do it in a different approach. So we try to understand who are the users of PMDs, e-scooters, the demographics, and then we market straight to them. So they are likely on social media, so we market directly to them. We do it in a pop-up style rather than having infrastructure all around, which is costly. To say, today we are in this area. If you are here, bring it down this time to this time for recycling. And we hit 2.5 times the target NEA gave us. So it was a success in that sense. But the underlying logic I would like to highlight is that to understand the user behavior and then design something to make it easy for them. And then recycling rate should grow in tandem. Yeah.
I've been given the time card that we have 2 minutes left. Do you have a success case study that you can summarize in 2 minutes, Rémi?
I guess. My very first client in Singapore is a manufacturer, and the environmental health and safety manager that was in charge of the project for the waste audit was extremely knowledgeable about his own business and very much committed to make it a success. So he really facilitated our work as a consultant and auditor to actually open the doors and get to talk to every aspect of the business. We ended up issuing a report with several very meaningful recommendations in terms of cost savings, in terms of improvement, in terms of resources. And it was the only client so far I know of that have actually implemented our recommendation almost immediately once the report was issued.
That's a dream.
Yeah, that's actually a dream. Again, the recommendation that they implemented first was technology-based. Right. Thing that didn't require them to change the way they will normally do, just to upgrade the machines. But that was definitely a real success here.